It's impossible to talk about the Marauder battleships in EVE Online, or indeed any form of meta, without mentioning the Amarr Empire's Paladin Marauder. This ship is absolutely beastly, to put it mildly. It has long been a favourite for PvE players all across New Eden, and in Anoikis things really aren't that different. I've already showcased both the Golem and the Varga running C5 core garrisons, so it was about time that I took out the Amarr Empire's Paladin for a spin to see how that would compare side by side. And honestly, whilst I'm not a fan of the Amarr Empire ships as much as I do tend to fly them quite a bit, I don't like the look of them, I don't like lasers, I have to admit that this is a pretty powerful battleship. So in this video, I'm going to be showcasing exactly how to fit it for a core garrison and comparing it to both the Varga and the Golem to see how well it works. Ahoy there folks, I'm Captain Benzie and welcome back to another video for EVE Online. In today's video, we're finally going to be undocking the Amarr Empire's Tech 2 Marauder battleship, the Paladin. Now, this is an Amarr ship. I have mentioned before, I'm not a huge fan of Amarr ships at all, but it's worth talking about this one because it is a very popular vessel. Now, it does get away with the colour scheme. I don't like the typical Amarr Empire gold and white, but here the gold and this claret dried blood red does actually kind of do something for me. I like the look of it, though the hull of the ship is not particularly one of my favourites either. It's a little bit too phallic for my tastes. Also, the Bastion mode, it's not the most impressive of the four, let's be completely honest. Finally, it is an Amarr ship, which means we're using the god-fearing Laser Monkey's light show weaponry of flashlights, or lasers, I suppose they prefer to call them, energy turrets, but hey, they're flashlights. I don't get it. I'm not a huge fan of lasers. I prefer to launch several thousand tons of hot lead into the side of my opponent's ships, rather than just shine a torch at their armour and hope that it burns holes through it. But I don't know, maybe that's just me. Anyway, in today's video, I'm going to be taking this solo through a C5 core garrison, comparing it to the Varga and the Golem that I've already done this with, and showcasing a fit that I found that works really quite nicely for this. I was lucky enough to have a C5 connected to our J-Space home, and it was pretty much on a crit. I managed to jump through with the Varga and have the hull be crit behind me, so I knew I was pretty safe inside there for the most part. If I ran back, well, no one was going to jump a fleet in through from that direction at the very least. Anyway, if you do enjoy this video, let me know, hit like on it, drop a comment down below to let me know how you feel about the Paladin, which is your favourite Marauder and why, or heck, just what you're doing in EVE Online right now and what you're enjoying. And if you do want to go the extra mile to help support this channel, I've got a Patreon page, a Redbubble merchandise store, and a PayPal tip jar that you can support me making content like this. Finally, if you are fairly new to EVE Online, I do have a referral link in the description down below that you can click to get yourself 1 million free skill points. You just sign in. As long as you haven't used a referral link, you can use it. So even if it's on an existing account that you've had a while, if you've not used one, that's a great way to do it. Finally, and I've said finally twice, I'm well aware, you can join the Catskull Discord down below to talk about all things EVE Online, and even consider joining the Catskull Corporation if that sounds like your kind of thing. All that said and done then, let's jump right into talking about the Amarr Empire's Tech 2 battleship, the Paladin. First of all then, as usual, let's talk about the Paladin hull itself, what this is, what it isn't, and we're going to spend a brief moment of time looking at the Bastion module as well, because that is very important to what makes a Marauder tick. So looking at the Paladin's traits page, we're going to start with its role bonuses. First of all, we have a 100% bonus to large energy turret damage. Now, the Paladin itself only actually has 4 turret hardpoints, so this essentially counts it as 8 turret hardpoints, which gives it a bit more of heavy firepower that you'd expect from just 4 hardpoints. And again, the Bastion mode is going to kick that into overdrive. Now, these are large energy turrets, which, okay, yeah, it kind of gets me. I'm not a fan of lasers. I don't know how many times I have to mention that in videos before people sit there and stop asking, well, if you don't like them, why do you keep flying them? Because I want to showcase them. There's a difference. I will fly things that I don't enjoy in order to showcase them, and the Paladin is well worth talking about. We also get a 100% bonus to tractor beam range and velocity, so if you want to use that for bringing Rex closer to you, you can do. 70% reduction in micro jump drive reactivation delay, which is really useful. It allows us to basically use a micro jump drive to reposition nice and quickly and be able to do that frequently throughout a battle if we need to. And I'm going to skip over the Bastion modules, we'll come back to that. We then have the usual battle shield tanking stuff. 100% bonus to shield extender hit points, 50% bonus to armor plate hit points, and a 5% additional bonus to reinforced bulkhead hit points. If you are fitting any of those passive modules, you will get better effects out of them. I honestly have never seen a shield extender Paladin, but I suppose it is theoretically possible. Nice to know that if you go into PvP with an armor plate fit though, the Marauder itself can hold up quite comfortably with that. That said, because of how the Bastion module works, passive fits don't really strike me as a particularly good option, but I don't know, I'm sure someone out there uses a passive fit on one of the Marauders, if not the Paladin, and I'd love to hear from you in the comments. So let's talk about the Bastion module for a moment. This is what makes a Marauder unique. Without the Bastion module, a Marauder is theoretically worse than the Tech 1 variants, in this case, worse than the Apocalypse, definitely worse than the Apocalypse Navy issue. So it's the Bastion module that really makes this powerful. This does take up a high slot, it's pretty much a requirement for the fitting, and when you activate the Bastion module, it essentially does three things. First of all, it locks you in position. It stops your movement, it stops you warping, it stops you doing anything interesting like that. You are stuck in place. However, it massively increases your tank and it increases your DPS. So let's look at the DPS first of all. We get a turret rate of fire bonus, 50% reduction there, so literally half the speed to fire your turrets. That's a double your DPS on its own right there. As we come further down as well, we also get optimal range and fall-off bonuses of 25%, which does work really nicely with the Paladin and its lasers. We're going to be enjoying those bonuses an awful lot. In regards to tanking, you'll see here that we get things like shield boost bonuses. There is an armor one in here somewhere as well. Armor repair bonus 100% there, so you are doubling your armor repair effectiveness in that time. Should also be noted as well, forgot to mention earlier, not only does the Bastion module being active hold you in position, it also reduces the amount of remote repairs that you can get. So if you're in a fleet and you've got Bastion mode on, you get less remote repairs from other people. You are basically going to be relying on your local tank, but that local tank is effectively doubled. That in itself is pretty cool. Very powerful little module. It can be activated. It lasts for 60 seconds and then you can deactivate it. This does mean that if something bad happens, like you get jumped and you want to warp away, you have up to 60 seconds before the Bastion module turns off, before you can even start to initiate warp. That does need to be stressed. With Bastion module active, you are a sitting duck. You spot someone on D-scan just as your Bastion module activates, you've got 60 seconds before you can even think of responding to that. Well worth noting ahead of time. Anyway, back to the traits page then for the Paladin. We get some really nice bonuses here, even though this was technically, in inverted commas, nerfed during the Viridian expansion, still very powerful. Now, the Amar battleship skill, you'll need at least to level 5 in order to fly this. That's going to give you a 50% reduction in large energy turret activation cost, so less capacitor need to use those, and a 25% bonus to the large energy turret's optimal range. Nice optimal range on this thing, especially with that Bastion module active. We're going to be getting some really seriously powerful ranges out of this and hitting our opponents hard with some large energy turrets. We then have the Marauder skill bonuses, and honestly I would not even consider undocking a Marauder until we are at least at Marauder 4. Marauder 5 is probably recommended, but you can run this fit in these sites at Marauder 4. You're just going to be much better and safer at 5. So this gives you a 7.5% bonus to armor repairer amount, that's 37.5% at full training, which I have, and a 5% or 25% of full training bonus to large energy turret damage, more of those high power energy turrets slamming into your opponent. This essentially all twins together to give an incredibly high DPS, incredibly high tank battleship that unfortunately does struggle when it comes to maneuverability. You're going to be parked in place and you're basically going to tank and wreck everything unless you get ridiculously overwhelmed. And if you do get overwhelmed, yeah, you don't really have much option to run away. As for the fit itself then, this is what I'm running for the C5 Core Garrison combat sights. There is a drifter refit, I don't have that readily available at the moment, I'm not going to be showcasing that in today's video. Do understand that the Paladin can take the drifter, it's not the best at it, it's going to have slower clear times than some of the alternatives, notably the Golem, but it can do those with a refit, which I'll talk about in a future video. This is just for the C5 Core Garrison. Now for the high slots here, we're starting off with Pulse Lasers, Mega Pulse Laser 2s. I've gone for the Mega because we get a nice balance of the tracking, range, and damage here. And you'll see that with Conflagration fitted, we've got an optimal range basic of 20 kilometers and a fall off of 32. Now if we simulate this and thus we have the Bastion Module active, this suddenly goes up to 25 kilometer optimal and 40 kilometer fall off, and some really scary DPS coming out of that. I am not particularly high in my large energy turret skills. I think I have large energy turret 5 and then 1 in each of the specializations just to be able to use the Tech 2 crystals, and you can see I'm still getting 2,265.4 DPS out of this, of which only 83 is from the drones. The vast majority of that is coming straight out of those turrets. 4 turrets hitting like trucks. That is with Conflagration, of course. You are going to lose some if you swap to different crystals, but even with Scorch, you are getting monstrous range and monstrous damage. The other high slots then are pretty much utilities. Of course, we've got the Bastion module, that goes without saying. I do also have a Dark Blood Heavy Energy Nosferatu, just to help with our capacitor a little bit. Put that onto the biggest capacitor you can find and try and support your capacitor a little bit. Now, it won't necessarily start taking effect early on. Remember, in order for a Nosferatu to work, you have to have lower capacitor than the target you are draining from. So if you see that the Nosferatu isn't working early on, don't panic. As your capacitor does start to go lower, the Nosferatu will eventually start to kick in and drain. You can't cap out the rats, they effectively have infinite capacitor, but it's infinite at a set level. So once you drop below that level, you can just keep draining from something almost like a blood bag. It's really quite powerful and very useful in this regards. It does mean that we're keeping up the cap stability. You'll see that without that running, we are not capacitor stable. Admittedly, we still have 10 minutes and 40 seconds of capacitor time, but with that active, we suddenly become stable, which is pretty nice. We do then have 2 Imperial Navy large EMP smart bombs, 375 damage from each of these, and an area of effect radius of 7,500. This is just for taking care of any frigates that happen to get a little bit closer. In a C5 Core Garrison, we are going to have frigates orbiting quite frequently, and they all come within that 7.5 kilometer range, so we can deal with those quite handily using just the EMP smart bombs. Don't have your drones out. I've made this mistake so many times, launching my drones at ships and then smart bombing. You will take out your own drones as well, as you will also need to be aware that if you are parked next to a mobile tractor unit, for example, your smart bombs will also be damaging that, so do bear that in mind. Moving on to the mid slots then. I've gone for some application here with a tracking computer 2. I carry both tracking speed scripts and optimal range scripts. Optimal range scripts are great if enemy ships are a little bit further away. You can go into Scorch ammunition and put the optimal range script in there, and you can be doing optimal damage all the way out to like 40-50 kilometers and upwards against some of those battleships that start at say 70 kilometers away and come a little bit closer. Also very useful for the turrets in the first wave of the Core Garrison. Then switch to optimal range scripts, sorry, not optimal range scripts, the tracking speed script when we're trying to hit the cruisers that are orbiting at 15 kilometers, or indeed once the battleships are within your optimal range basic, you can just swap to the tracking speed script and make sure you're applying your damage even better to those. Just helps with the clear times, helps make sure that you are hitting things well. You will need that that tracking speed script in there in order to deal decent damage against the cruisers that are orbiting at 15. If you're trying to hit without the tracking computer active, you will be missing. And at 15 kilometer orbits, I kind of prefer the tracking computer to using webs. You can get some webs out that far, especially with overheating, but to me, I massively prefer the tracking computer 2, even over a target painter. But again, could be up to you. I like the fact that this does the tracking, but also gives me the range bonus, so I can hit the things further away like the turrets. We then have some capacitor stability in the form of an Imperial Navy cap recharger, a Thukker large cap battery, and a Republic fleet large cap battery. Now I've gone for a Thukker and a Republic fleet. You can go for 2 Republic fleet or 2 Thukker, entirely up to you. Ultimately, one of those gives you better max capacitance, the other one gives you better resistance against neutralization. We are going to be having newts in the sight quite heavily, so you can go either way. To me, it doesn't really make a huge difference. I've gone for one of each because that's what I had lying around. For the low slots then, continuing the capacitor theme, there's also a Dark Blood capacitor power relay in order just to help keep that capacitor a little bit more stable. If you happen to have slightly better skills than I do, you might want to swap this out for something else, especially if you're at the full 5 capacitor skills and controlled bursts and things like that. I don't have controlled bursts 5, which I don't know if that's going to cross a threshold there that allows you to swap this out for something else. On the subject of something else, that would be an Imperial Navy heatsink. I've got 2 of those fitted currently, just to up the amount of damage we're doing. Obviously, the more heatsinks you can fit, the more damage you do, the faster you clear. Simple as that. 2 of them is enough for what I'm finding here. I'm going to stick with those. Then we have tank. You'll notice I've only got one armor repairer here, a Centus X-type large armor repairer, admittedly, which is fairly expensive. This is not a cheap fit compared to the Varga and the Golem, which come in at around 1.5 billion depending. This is a 3.5 billion ISK ship, so do bear that in mind. There's a little bit of bling going on here, and you do want this nice and powerful, because with Bastion mode, we have doubled that here to 4,677 HP every 12 seconds. You can see that we have an EHP of 389.8 HP per second with Bastion mode active. The rest of our tank then is a Coreli A-type multispectrum coating, 2 of those, just to keep up the resistances but without harming the capacitor, and a damage control 2. This gives us nice bonuses to our armor resistances, 15% across the board there, just helps keep our tank a little bit higher. You'll see that looking at our resistances with everything active, we've got 83% on electromagnetic, 80 on explosive, and then 78 on each of thermal and kinetic. That's going to heavily reduce the amount of damage we take, and then the Bastion module with the armor repairer is going to keep us alive. For the rigs, finally, a large auxiliary nano pump 2 just to keep those reps up, alongside a large capacitor control circuit 2 to give us a little bit more capacitor stability. Now, I did mention we do have drones in this. They are only light drones. I carry 3 each of the Caldari, Galente, and Amar light drones, depending on what you're going up against. You can also carry ECM drones, very useful in case someone does happen to drop you and it's just a solo player trying their luck at you. Again, obviously, you're going to have to wait for the Bastion module to time out before you can use the ECM drones, but they're not a bad option. It can be useful in a pinch. Drones are not going to be particularly useful for your damage output. Anyway, that there is the fit. It will be linked in the description down below, so you can copy it into Python, copy it into game, and see how that works with your skills. Beyond that, if you do have any amendments you think would really work, let me know in the comments. Otherwise, let's jump into that combat demonstration. So I'm warping into the core garrison site at 0. You might decide that you want to warp in at a bit of a range or whatever, or try to move around the site first of all in case anyone jumps you, but ultimately warping in at 0, I'm within range of everything that I want to shoot at, and with the Bastion mode being a thing anyway, it's not like I'm running if anyone jumps in anyway, so I may as well just sit at 0 and enjoy things. Now I lock onto one of the frigates, all of the cruisers, and the 3 turrets that we have at the start of this. Now those sentry guns, arguably to me, are the most important thing to kill. They do the most damage, and you'll see that by using the good old Scorch ammunition, Scorch crystals, we're actually hitting those for really nice damage, and thanks to Bastion mode doubling, or rather halving our activation time on the weapons, we're shooting pretty heavy, pretty hard, pretty frequently, and those things are going down quickly. I mean, if you compare this to, say, the Varga or the Golem video, specifically the Golem, you'll see how much faster those Orthrus turrets are going down. Now on this wave, it is those Awakened Sentinels that are the trigger, and thank goodness we don't really care about them. Awakened Sentinels are basic cruisers that have webs. We're not going anywhere anyway thanks to Bastion, so we don't really give a crap that they're webbing us. It does nothing to us. The 3 frigates, however, the 5 frigates that we have, the Emergent Sentinels, those are scrams and webs. Again, really not a huge problem to us, because scrams, we're not warping, webs, we're not moving. You'll notice that once the Emergent Sentinels are all within 7.5 kilometers though, I start to essentially activate the smart bombs, and I'm going to shoot with those. And, you know, activating those smart bombs, you'll see that those are punching those sentinels down fairly swiftly. Once the awakened sentinels are what I'm shooting at, you'll see I've swapped to my tracking speed script, and I've swapped down to conflagration. Better tracking, better damage, and obviously swapping the optimal for the tracking means that I can hit these that little bit better. Still not particularly great hits. These may only be cruisers, but you see they take a bit of a pounding to get down. They do have pretty good resistances. I'm hitting okay, like you'll see, as I'm getting a few glances and that around, but for the most part some nice hits and things going on there, that is, you know, pulling that down fairly quickly. Watching the emergent sentinel though, you'll see that that EMP smart bomb is beginning to chug through those. We've got 2 smart bombs running. In a couple of cycles, those smart bombs will finish everything off. Boom, there go all the frigates in one go. If you were watching the overview there, great fun to watch. At this point in time though, it's basically just pick the next of the awakened sentinels, shoot at them. I like to put the Nosferatu on the last one just in case I need to be draining some capacitor from something. Again, it's not huge at this point in time, but it's there. I should also really have turned the smart bombs off at this point, because those are heavily using my capacitor, and I should be recharging ready for the next wave. Speaking of the next wave, Wave 2 is 3 Sleepless Sentinel battleships that are all armed with scrams, webs, and Nosferatus, or neutralizers, alongside 6 Emergent Keeper frigates. Now, the frigates are all equipped with remote reps and newts. The frigates, theoretically, we could just nuke them all with those EMPs, right? Nice and quickly and easily. Yeah, that's going to spawn Wave 3. The frigates are the spawn, and spawning Wave 3 while I still have 3 battleships alive is going to be a problem. You'll see that I've swapped here to good old Scorch ammunition, Scorch crystals, and I'm putting the tracking range, the optimal range script on there to make sure that I hit those Sleepless Sentinels as best as I can. Now, they are actually surprisingly fast-moving battleships, so in a worst case, you might find that these things do get nice and close, and you can swap down to just the tracking speed script using Scorch, or you could go optimal range script with conflagration. It's entirely up to you. Just keep an eye on the ranges, and once you're a bit more familiar with the ship than I will be, then yeah, you can sort of modify that to your best needs. You'll see that I still have my drones out at this point in time. I should have brought those back in. They are taking some damage at this point in time, and you see I finally noticed that and started to bring the drones back. The Emergent Keepers do really like to shoot at drones. All sleeper frigates love chewing drones. At this point though, I've got all 6 of the Emergent Keepers locked. I have all 6 locked at once, so that when I start smart bombing, I can make sure that at least one of them is going to survive. At this point, I haven't really bothered to start smart bombing yet. You definitely can do. I've launched a mobile tractor unit as well. That is going to be hit by my smart bombs, which is why I've locked onto it here, just to keep an eye on it. And now by using those smart bombs, I can watch all 6 of those Emergent Keepers. Like the conflagration crystals that I'm using now are more than happily hitting that Sleepless Sentinel and doing some work on it. I should swap to the tracking speed script at this point, whereas I'm still using the optimal, but hey, it's good enough. And I'm watching those frigates closely with the smart bombs. You see that because they're remote reps, there are some of them that have more health than others. The one that is right smack bang in the middle is sitting on really nice high health, while everything is now down into hull. So I reckon I can do a couple more activations and not worry too much. There we go, boom, down go all of the frigates except one. You need to make sure that you leave one of those frigates alive, or Wave 3 is going to spawn, and that is a bad situation to be in. Anyway, with that done then, let's skip to Wave 3. With Wave 2 all but finished, it's time to activate those last few smart bombs, or use drones, whichever you fancy, to take down that last Emergent Keeper and trigger Wave 3. At this point, I just want to draw your attention to the Bastion mode on the Paladin and how disappointing it is, especially when compared to the Vargas one. I don't know, it just kind of opens up a little bit at the bottom. There's some nice electricity, but that's really it. Anyway, Wave 3 has a whole bunch of cruisers. We have 5 Awakened Sentinels, these web. We have 3 Awakened Keepers, these are scrams, webs, and newts. And then 3 battleships, Sleepless Sentinels again, that scrab, wem, and newt. Web and newt. Wow, my voice fell out there. Now, the Keepers, to me, are the biggest threat. We can't kill the battleships yet, because those are the triggers. The Awakened Keepers those, because they've got newts, we do kind of want to get rid of them quickly. They die quickly, but there's a few of them. There's 3 of them that we need to take care of. So I swap here to, again, I'm back to Scorch using the optimal range script, and boom, down that one goes nice and quickly. These things don't have much health, fortunately, so they're nice and easy to take care of. At this point, I may consider swapping the, again, the optimal range script for a tracking speed script, but things are going nicely. Now, I want to talk about how the tank works on this as well, because you'll see I'm below 50% armor, and that looks kind of scary until you realize that, remember, the Bastion module, doubles the amount of health you get back from an armor repairer. And so suddenly, your health goes all the way down, and then whoop, it's all the way back up at full again. It's great fun to watch. It can look a little bit tense at times, but that's kind of how the Marauders work, because they're doubling the repairers. Essentially, you just have to sit there, you take a load of damage, and then you repair all of it in one go, and it feels great. Anyway, there we are. With the Awakened Keepers down, I can start to go for the Sentinels. I've gone for the Tracking Speed script and Conflagration now, and we're going to start to pull those down. Then we'll finish off by killing those 3 battleships. You should theoretically take 2 of those battleships out first, because, again, they've got neutralizers. We're actually okay being neutered by them, and we can survive that quite comfortably. But if you're not overly comfortable, you're a little bit unsure, take out 2 of the Sleepless Sentinels. That way you're getting rid of 2 out of the 3 newts that are possibly on you. Just make sure you leave 1 of them, because that last Sleepless Sentinel is going to be the trigger for the 4th and final wave. Now, honestly, if you've survived Wave 3, you've gotten over the most difficult step of this entire core garrison site. The 4th and final wave, we have 2 Sleepless Keepers, which are kind of scary in fairness. They're neutralizing battleships that do a fair amount of damage. We've got 2 cruisers in the form of Awakened Sentinels, again, really nothing to worry about here. Standard 15-kilometer orbit webbing battleships, and 3 frigates. Now, the 3 frigates are Emergent Wardens. They scram, web, and newt. They're also going to come within our usual 7-kilometer range, so we're not going to have to worry about those at all. We can just smart bomb the ever-living daylights out of them when they get into range. So here I'm just going to shoot those Awakened Sentinels at range first of all, because they're fairly fast moving. Whilst I've got the Scorch ammo loaded, I may as well just be shooting at those and trying to kill them before they get their traversal up. Then I can move on to the battleships. You'll notice that essentially once the frigates are in range, I can smart bomb them, but I do a stupid. I leave my drones out and then I start smart bombing. So bye-bye all of my drones, and then again we're going to have it in a second. There goes that last Acolyte. We're smart bombing those last few ships. That Emergent Warden has just kind of pulled back out the 7.5-kilometer range, like nope, 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 nope. And we can now start shooting like the Sleepless Keeper and stuff like that. You can see at this point we are in no danger in the site. And the mobile tractor unit, even with me using the smart bomb, because I didn't let the smart bombs take it into armor, essentially it's regenerating its shields. And when you scoop that at the end of an anomaly anyway, you know, you loot and scoop your mobile tractor unit, you fully regenerate the shields anyway. So like, oh no, it takes a bit of damage on its shields. It's fine. It's really no stress. So smart bombing with it, not a problem. It's worth noting that on the right-hand side of the screen in my overview, you'll see there is a decloaked transmission relay. This is the item that, when it appears, you can lock onto it and shoot it. That will spawn the Drifter Response battleship. Do not do that in this fit. You will die. Eventually, I will put out a video showcasing exactly how you can fit a Paladin to take on the Drifter. That video is not this video. Ultimately, I didn't have enough money to get both of the fits, and I didn't have the time to, you know, try and get that kind of footage, even if I'd, you know, gone and sold all of this loot afterwards. Again, I came into this wormhole with our connection being destabilized. My jump in put it into crit, so I knew that my jump out would close it back behind me, or would incredibly likely close it behind me. So I wasn't going to risk coming back out, selling the loot, and then coming back in again. Ultimately, though, these are 250 million ISK a site, just over, in blue loot, which you can then take to a station and sell to the NPC buy orders. 250 million ISK for a site that took me about 15-20 minutes. That's pretty easy, and it means in an hour, you're getting, what, 750 to a billion, depending on how fast you clear these sites. You're very quickly going to start making your money back on this ship. Now, the Paladin, admittedly, because it is so much more expensive than the other two, it's going to take longer, but I know the Paladin's a popular option. Do I like the Paladin? No, I massively prefer the Varga. I think the Varga is much better at clearing the core garrisons, and it does pretty well against the drifters as well. The Golem is insanely good against the drifter, although a little bit slower on the main sites, but its tank doesn't break for anything. And the fact that those two are a lot cheaper, I do think they're better options. They do the sites just as fast, if not faster, and they do it cheaper. So for me, that's a better way of doing things. I don't know. Obviously, if you like the Paladin, go for the Paladin. I'm not going to say that Viridian nerfed it. It didn't, really. Slightly less optimal range, but as you can see from doing this, that doesn't really change much. It still runs really well. And if you're skilled into a Paladin and you fancy taking it out into a C5, now you know how. Let me know how you get on in the comment section down below. Otherwise, folks, thank you for watching this one right the way through to the end. Hopefully see some of you at FanFest in September. Otherwise, happy sailing, and see you in New Eden!